Oh, it's a couple months ago.
After the
Hello, welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your moderator. I'm also president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. You know, these programs are very interesting to taxpayers. We sometimes unearth information that's little known. And we always have experts in the field. And the exciting thing about this is that you don't know what's coming next. Well, we have a return guest. This is Supervisor-elect Dennis Mills, who's also Director in the Calaveras County Water District. Dennis, welcome.
Good evening. It's been, what, a couple months since...
Well, you were a candidate then.
Yeah,
now you're elect.
and the whirlwind continues. There was no such thing as a honeymoon period when it comes to this. We got fully engaged right from the very start. So as we look at all of the issues that surround Calaveras County, there's a lot of things going on. And it's just a matter of whether or not, what's important to everyone and what do they want to keep up on. But that's what we're doing. We're meeting with staff at the board or at the county and talking with them about their challenges, their opportunities. And we're meeting with various supervisors from other counties and assemblymen and congressmen and wherever we can establish relationships. So it's working out well.
I'm curious, how's the relationship in other counties with the supervisors and their department heads? Do the department heads report to the chief administrative officer, or do they kind of report to the board overall? How's that generally run?
That's interesting because each county runs their organizational chart differently. It really, I think, it develops over time. It almost develops its own culture. And when you look at our organizational chart as it is right now, I see that there's a need to have a discussion about who reports to who and why. The idea that, for instance, department heads are appointed or hired and fired by the Board of Supervisors rather than a CEO seems a little bit strange to me. We understand constitutional officers and their roles and responsibilities is very separate and independent.
That's elected officers.
That's elected. So when you look at elected officials, for instance, they really should be only given a budget and left to do the job of serving the public that they've been voted and elected to do.
Right.
And the idea, for instance, of someone in an elected position coming before the board asking for positions or staffing or approvals on things somehow just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I'm going to have to be proven that that's the best way to make it work. I think they should be given their budget and be left alone to do the job they need to do.
That means that the CAO would be responsible for what the departments are doing, and then the CAO will be given a report and recommendations to the board.
That's correct. When you look, I actually would like to call them a CEO rather than a CAO. It's a little different position of responsibility, but they should be the ones doing the appointing of department heads. And so when the board, by consensus, asks for a report and looks for further information, they're not doing end runs around a CAO looking for information or trying to find more. They can work directly through their administrative office to get things done, and if things aren't working out the way they should, then they talk to their administrative officer. They're not talking to department heads. It's a little different situation, but it would take a lot of the angst that I'm hearing from the various staff. It's almost as though the lines of communication, in their words, not mine, have been blurred.
Yeah, I understand that.
And so it's a simple process of just cleaning up who reports to who and why, rather than doing it as it is now. So I'd like to have the board take a look at that and decide, again, by an agreement with the board that they want to change and try to find a different way to do it.
We have 4 new supervisors coming on board, and it looks like in all history, if there would be something fundamental to be looked at, now would be the time.
Well, that's correct, because if you look at the new board, there's an entirely new personality that's going to be created from those various members. All of them are coming with differing levels of experience, differing levels of talent and abilities, and what a great opportunity to take a look at the whole structure and start to develop their own style of leadership and how they're going to react or respond to the given needs that the county has.
You know, you've been serving as a director at the Calaveras County Water District, and I understand that you've done some good there. And some people are saying it's a shame for you to leave.
Well, hopefully it's going to be sustainable. The board there will select my replacement in December, and that person will be officially appointed to that position in January.
I see.
As I leave that office. So hopefully the work that we have done there, remember I was the chair of the Finance Committee. I'm also the CCWD representative to the Parks and Rec Commission. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of other things that have been going on in the background that we just hope that work was worthwhile and that it will continue. I think that we've seen a lot of stability in the agency over the last couple of years from what it has been over the previous. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see that stability continue. Also,
I understand salaries are kept in line.
Yes.
And rates have been kept in line too.
Yes, they are.
And that's something new.
Not that they won't have to struggle with that concept of reviewing the rates maybe in 2017 or 2018. But I would certainly like the district to look at their purchasing and contracting policies and be sure that those are updated. It's something I'd been asking for some time before they work to a rate hearing, that we're sure that all of the money is being spent wisely and that we're accounting for what we're doing in a proper way that the public can understand it.
Right. That kind of removes the fat.
To some degree it does. You're right.
What are some of the main issues that the taxpayer needs to know about in the area of water? I understand the state has a lot of influence as to what's going to happen in our county.
Yes.
And not many people know the ins and outs of that besides you.
So there are other people, but I would defer anyone to go to the Water Board's website and look at phases 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the Bay Delta Plan. What that does on phase 1 is to take 40% of dry year water and remove it from the watersheds and make it unavailable for our use. That is a challenge all by itself, but when you get to phase 3, now you're talking about complete revision of the water rights. So I don't know if they're planning on just stopping at 1914 or whether they're going to go pre-1914 and look at 1888 or some other point of adjustment. But that's 3,200 to 3,500 pages, which I haven't gotten through all of it. It's like reading War and Peace. So for people that like to painfully go through that much material, that's fine. But the Bay Delta Plan will definitely have an impact on Calaveras County as our watershed because those people that are farmers in the valley are going to be left to find another source for water. When they can't divert it off of a stream, a surface stream, they're left with no other alternative but to pump. So that's going to bump up against the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which was recently passed, which tells everyone that we can't be in a shortfall in the San Joaquin Valley anymore in our water. So right now, San Joaquin County is pumping less than 100, is overdrafting by about 100,000 acre-feet per year. In Stanislaus County, it's like 274,000 acre-feet per year. It's a lot of water that they're overdrafting by. Now, if you add into it the loss of surface water, they're left with no option. They're going to have to pump. So now the question is, how do we do that and still maintain the regulation or meet the regulation requirements of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act? So part of that is that the state has required the counties to come up with a sustainable a GSA, which is a groundwater sustainability agency, and each county has to be responsible for their portion of the San Joaquin Basin. So I've been working not from the CCWD perspective, but also from the supervisor's perspective, and having meetings with, for instance, Stanislaus County Supervisor Terry Withrow and his staff, Mr. Ward and the rest of them down there, to develop a memorandum of understanding that we both share the eastern portion of the San Joaquin Basin, so why don't we work together in the responsibility of that? Because the state said if CCWD doesn't do it and other agencies don't get involved to do it, the counties are going to be the backstop. And that has to be done by June of 2017. Most people aren't even aware that it's out there and it has to be done. So public hearings will begin in December, both in Stanislaus County, here in CCWD, and hopefully in January with the Calaveras Board of Supervisors to begin to put that activity in place.
How would that affect the property owner in Calaveras County?
I'm looking at how much water it's going to remove from, say, for instance, New Melones.
Okay.
The potential impact that loss would have on Lake Tulloch, what it would do to Lake Hogan, even Pardee and Comanche may be affected by it. So our economic base is based on tourism here to a great degree. So you remove their ability to recreate on our water ponds, so to speak. You're taking away a big portion, plus the values of homes, for instance, in the Copperopolis area would suffer dramatically if we had some adjustments to that lake.
I understand Congressman McClintock has put together a plan to try to bump up the storage capacities, and that has gone to Congress has passed it, but it's stopped at the Senate.
Correct.
And in that plan are some solutions on this saving fish at the expense of human beings.
Yes, I had a meeting with Chair of Supervisors in Stan County, Carl Rodefer, and Randy Hanfeld, who's also supervisor, and Congressman McClintock just recently over the Stanislaus River Basin, and how can the federal government assist us with the Central Valley Project in being to some degree a roadblock to the state's decisions to remove how much water. Because remember, the twin tunnels that Governor Brown is suggesting now don't pencil out without that additional water being pushed into the delta. One of the fears is that how much salinity can they pump to Southern California? So they have to be careful that the water in the delta remains as salt-free as possible. So it's not just about fish, it's about everything else. People don't realize, for instance, the San Luis Reservoir down on the Pacheco Pass is the regulating reservoir for the twin canals that head south. But 1/3 of the water that is supplied to, say, the Santa Clara County and the city of San Jose comes right out of San Luis. So when that reservoir drops because they are using water somewhere else, there are other areas that suffer besides the San Joaquin Basin.
I understand that there may be some regulations on wells that that Calaveras County property owners may have to be faced with?
That's not currently in the plans to incorporate right now. What they're talking about is strictly monitoring of the groundwater. We have monitoring wells with Calaveras County Water District in the West Valley. I think that also Stan County is looking at doing the same thing on their part of it. So there's going to have to be studies done. I don't want us to get to the same point that happened in Nevada recently, where they told people, private wells, you have to be limited in how much water you draw, and we will be monitoring, and you have to report. But please remember, too, Senate Bill 88, SB 88, is also going to go into effect in 2018. And that's going to require those diverters or people who hold ponds 10 acres or more, who divert substantial amounts of water, are going to have to be reporting on a regular basis to the state as to how much water they're taking for private use. It's just another piece.
Well, it seems like in a home, a rural home, you have a septic system and you have a well. Okay, they get the water from the well, and then it goes to the septic system, back into the ground, except what's actually, used. And even when they water crops, a good percentage of the water goes back in the ground, in a water table. So I wonder if those sort of regulations are really needed.
Wow. I mean, if you think about, for instance, we were flooding our nut orchards years back, that just recently changed to where they're doing drip irrigation.
Right.
So all of a sudden, where we were doing groundwater recharging with this flooding in the valley, we're not doing that to a great degree anymore. Is that affecting our ability to put water back in the ground? Absolutely, it is. Does it affect even the environment or the atmosphere? The general area of that general area probably does. So there's a lot at play here, and I don't think that we truly understand the effects or the impacts of these. We think they're minor decisions, but they could be quite major decisions if they're done wrong.
That reminds me, the trees use water.
Correct.
And they put it in the atmosphere. They don't return to the ground. And when you overpopulate trees, then two things happen. You have no place for the snow melt to sit there to slowly supply water over through the summer. They hit the trees and then they melt quickly. And then the trees are pulling a lot of the water that otherwise would be going in the water table below. So mismanagement of the forest can have a dramatic negative effect on our water supply.
And I know Congressman McClintock has been championing that point on the Stanislaus Forest. First of all, I come from a lumbering family. So having that background, I can say the Middle Fork or the Stanislaus Basin has never suffered a major fire going back into the 1920s. Why? Because of the forestry practices that were used over the years in that basin. It is not the same forestry practices that have been used in the majority of the rest of the forests in California. So I always have to thank my great-grandfather for some of the work that was done back then. You take out the big ones so you can let the little ones grow up to be big ones, but you don't remove or clear cut. You do selective thinning, and you make use of that resource, and it'll sustain itself. But the way we've done it lately is we've just kind of left it go, and the result is the money that we should be using to thin the forest and keep it viable has turned around and become money used to fight fires, which is not a good way to handle it in the long term. Yeah,
and all this smoke, I understand there might be some CO2 involved, and there's a scare about CO2. I wonder about the validity of that scare, but in any case, it would seem that forestry practices, federal forestry practices, which encourage forest fires, especially large and tremendous ones, actually hurt the environment.
That is correct, because it takes years to bring that soil back to a condition in which it is capable of sustaining new growth. They plant quickly as they can, but I was in doing fire service as a volunteer years ago with Calaveras County Fire. So there's been a lot of fires that I watched how much heat has been put into the ground and how it does devastate the ground even years later.
Now you'll be going to taking on new responsibilities, and I know how busy you are. I think there isn't a meeting that occurs in Calaveras County that you haven't been to.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I had a meeting the other night where they'd asked me to get up and speak just off the cuff, and I had to count on my hand, well, where have I been today? And I'd already been to 4 meetings. That was number 5, and I'd sent somebody else to a 6th meeting because I couldn't get there. But that level of activity is important, because there are a lot of issues that you have to be personally engaged in if you're going to have a good understanding of what the issues are and what people feel is their best answer to getting them resolved.
Yeah, that's good. It looks like you're going to be hitting the ground running when it comes January.
I absolutely am.
What are some of the other issues that? Well, one of them is the marijuana. We have apparently a new board that pretty much in favor of a ban, not on medical marijuana, but on commercial grows. And so we probably can expect if the voters approve the ban, then that'll be the way that the future will happen in Calaveras County for many years to come.
There's a lot of timing issues here. There's a lot of details that need to be worked out, questions that need to be answered. If you're looking at, for instance, you have to look at Prop 64. How are we going to comply with that? To what level will we permit other growing to occur? Whether or not the urgency ordinance will be continuing February of 2017, or whether, because it's going to need 4 votes to continue, will there be a necessity for modifications to it? And if that's something that the board can agree to, we're going to probably have to find new findings to justify those changes.
Right.
And so that's still going to need 4 votes to have that happen. I've already asked staff to start looking at all those options. You know, if this is what happens, then what else is going to happen, and how do we go from there? Kind of question.
I understand there's going to be an environmental impact report with that.
With the permanent ordinance that's been discussed to this point, but if we, the new board, decide that permanent ordinance isn't acceptable, then maybe the best thing to do is to drop the EIR out of this thing
until you have something.
Until we have something that we can agree to. There's just a lot of options on the table that are going to have to work themselves out very quickly.
Well, it looks like the basic numbers, we have 700 commercial growers plus a number of medical marijuana people, which apparently are not a problem with anybody that I've talked to. The commercial growing is a different story. We have the Sheriff's Department, acting under the emergency ordinance, has inspected perhaps 50 grows or applicants for commercial licenses, and has approved between 3 and 5 so far. But in the meantime, the county has collected $5,000 from each of the 700 applicants, and amounts to $3.7 million, unless I'm off on my numbers. And a good part has already been spent. So we have a situation that's not working, and we've basically said that the people could apply, but we're not structured to be able to handle those applications.
So you make a good point, and that is that did we thoroughly think this through before we started to put these policies in place? Did we look at all of the consequences? Were we ramped up to handle it? Whether the planning department was capable of handling 200 more applicants on top of the 100 plus planning applications that they make every year.
Right.
Even that's probably subject to question. So should this have been done through some type of a drug czar, or somebody that is a project manager? I can see the tree mortality, the butte fire, and the marijuana issue as having the need for 3 project managers to be able to round it all up and handle just those issues separately from the rest of the day-to-day activities. What we've done is we've basically leaped one service need on another service need, and they still have their basic services to take care of, and
right.
Then we're adding to it all of this other stuff that they are now being required to handle. It's an untenable situation at best. So I think we need to step back a little bit and take a look at what can we really handle, or what do we have the capacity to handle. And everybody says, how are you going to fund it? I hear that over and over again. Well, first of all, if you don't understand budgets and you don't understand how government works and compliance works, I would have probably come up with that same statement. But remember that, for instance, if someone does something that is violating a law, can you not fine them? Can you not put a penalty on them? Absolutely. So we need to look at really the cost of service and saying, was that $5,000 enough to handle the cost of service versus what we really had to do? The second thing is you have to look at 17.95.175. And what that basically talks about is, as does items 1 and 2, is that should we develop a permanent ordinance, that all of the applications stop at that point. Or in the case of number 2, it says that we may have other options. Doesn't say shall, it says may. So it will be up to the new board to decide whether anything continues past the urgency ordinance if a new decision is made.
Was that section you cited from the emergency ordinance?
That is cited from the urgency ordinance, and they can go to Muni Code or the Calaveras County Code on a Google search and they can see it.
How can you remember all that stuff?
I'm sorry. I would also look at the hold harmless agreement that's also written into the urgency ordinance, and it's in the same general section area, and that has to do with it indemnifies the county against any litigation based on the decisions that were made in the urgency ordinance. So if they, someone wants to say, well, we're going to sue you because you didn't do it the way we wanted it done, you've agreed to this by simply placing your application in front of us.
Well, I think that the courts usually go against the writer of the contract if it appears that it's one-sided.
That's true. I would like to look at an outside legal team in some of this as we go forward. I have familiarity with a team called Best, and Krieger, and they have written a good majority of the ordinances that are in California with cities and counties right now and have also litigated on those cases. So I would like to look at an outside legal team and get their opinion, someone who really, really thoroughly understands the consequences or the benefits of a policy that's put in place, because it's going to affect a lot of people, no matter how we do it. It
seems like the commercial marijuana industry is supported by high prices. I understand it's $1,000 a pound on the black market, and maybe higher than that when they do medical marijuana.
Depends on whether you're FOB, Sioux City, Iowa, or FOB
or interstate commerce.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I understand, I don't have any numbers yet, but I'd like to get numbers as to what it actually costs to create a pound of marijuana.
Well,
would it be a couple $100?
But if we're in a situation and we're talking about the cost of this, we have to also think about, if we're doing this for medical reasons, those 6 plants in Prop 47, the proposition,
right,
great, or 67. I understand that. But if we go beyond that and it becomes a business where you're making money,
right,
now we're in a whole different venue.
You got to have a profit.
Well, and that's the whole point.
Right.
So it's just one of many issues.
If supply increases dramatically, price goes down. Price goes down, the market disappears. The farmers disappear. They can't grow it. It doesn't make sense to grow it. Right?
Well, I would only suggest to go back to Article 6 of the Constitution and say that for those that want to go in that direction, then bring forth a constitutional amendment and amend those treaties that are driving our 1970 CSA, our Controlled Substances Act.
What else do you see coming up in the Supervisor? We have a couple minutes left.
Tree mortality.
Tree mortality.
I've been involved in that too because, again, coming from the lumber background,
right,
and just exactly how are we struggling to meet the needs, because it isn't just an agency by agency issue. It involves local, individual people.
And we need somebody in charge.
And we need somebody in charge of that as well. So for those that are concerned about trees on their private property, I would go to the county website and look under tree mortality and see what's available, because there's additional things coming up, additional funding sources coming up. And I just found another funding source today that I turned over to our CAO for follow-up. So,
Dennis,
already
we scratched the surface. So glad to have you, and thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert. See you next time, and you can get a recording of this by going to our website in about a week or so. That's calaveras.taxpayers.org, and it'll be uploaded to YouTube, and you can send it to others for educational purposes.